report of Hansard. This is the first meeting for our new member, Raymond McCartney, so you're very welcome, Raymond, to the committee.
Thank you very much.
I think it would also be timely to acknowledge the contribution of Mitchell McLaughlin to the work of committee, who has been here since 2007 and was chairperson from May 2007 to September 2009. So he served in the committee for 7 years. I don't know if Raymond's going to serve as long as Mitchell, but certainly was one of the best. Also, can I refer members to Raymond's declaration of interest as tab 1 of table papers, and that's for members to note. Moving on then, apologies have been received from Leslie Cree. Any other apologies? No.
Chair, I mean, I've heard of two-party government or two-party coalition. It appears to be two-party committee today.
Yeah. Moving on then, draft minutes, pages 5 to 8. Members content their record?
Yeah.
Agreed.
Agreed, yeah.
Table requests from DFP, pages 10 to 12 for noting. Can I advise members of the committee now go into closed session for further consideration, draft committee report and flexible working inquiry.
Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.
Meeting. Moving on to briefing from the Department on Managing Convergence of District Rates. Can advise members of the DFP's request to schedule briefing on the policy evaluations of business rate relief scheme has been postponed and replaced by a briefing on managing rates convergence. Can refer members to the DFP correspondence explaining the need for this change at your tabled packs. Okay, members, just while we're waiting for the witness, we'll do correspondence. Shane.
Okay, Chair, there's I think the correspondence is generally for noting. There's maybe two items that require decision. Page 129 of the pack. It's just correspondence. The OFMDFM committee is undertaking an inquiry into building a united community and had sought submissions from the other committees. DFP has responded saying it is not making a submission, so it's just to check if the committee's content enough just to advise the other committee that it won't be making a submission on the basis of it doesn't appear to be relevant to the DFP remit. And then there's correspondence at page 154 in relation to social implementation of social clauses, public procurement, and it really is, I suppose there's an opportunity for the committee maybe to schedule a focused session on social clauses, because it does show some difficulties the department seems to be having in terms of getting information from other departments to monitor the PFG commitment in that regard. Okay. I think the rest of the correspondence just for noting.
Okay. Members content?
Yeah.
Moving on to the session then with yourself, Brian. Okay. Just step up.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, obviously we were down for an hour session and we're now going to discuss the Managing Convergence of District Rates report that's been presented.
Yeah,
You wouldn't maybe take us through the report?
Yep, I will, of course, Chair. I apologise that we're not ready to talk to you about small business rate relief. We're still getting NICEP to finalise their report. There were some omissions from the report in relation to the terms of reference that we wanted them to complete before it's finalised and presented to the Minister and before they brief the Minister. After the Minister's briefed, I would like to come back to this committee and have a session with NICEP and talk you through their findings in some detail. I would have thought that would be about three weeks away or so on. So I apologise for this, but you know, the work is progressing very well and we should be able to deliver it very shortly. In relation to the consultation report on local government reform and the issue of managing rates convergence, we have sent the committee a copy of the consultation report, which has been published on our website, I think yesterday, and it outlines some of the views and summarises some of the views. Although there were only 15 responses to the consultation, 8 of those were from the new councils. I think there was 4 from legacy councils and 3 from organisations. No individual ratepayers responded to the consultation. But the responses we did get were very detailed. There was quite an extensive engagement with the local government sector, facilitated by NILGA, and there were a series of events held and a number of bilateral meetings held during that consultation period. And I've already advised the committee about the consultation process. I don't know whether you want me to read through the report. It might be better if I. Well, I'll give you some flavour of the views expressed. We had a series of questions set out in the consultation paper that we published way back in June, and the responses are summarised there. What I would say is that we were. Some of the responses were not what we expected. We expected quite a body of opinion in favour of a two-tier scheme. One type of scheme maybe of longer duration for those council areas likely to be affected most. But the very clear message we got from the consultation was that people wanted a single scheme with the same rules applying for each for all ratepayers, and for the relief to be distributed proportionately depending on the extent of the divergence in district rates. And we have taken heed of that. We have proposals to put to the Minister. Where we are at the moment is that we are completing our analysis. We've had to wait the outcome of the non-domestic revaluation. We've got a good data set last week from LPS that is sufficient to allow us to do the financial modelling, because as you're aware, as the committee is aware, the Executive has committed up to £30 million for the scheme, so we can't exceed that. So we want to make sure that the proposals we put to the Minister stay within that cost envelope, and that's what we're doing. This week we've had economists working flat out and trying to cost the proposals that we're going to put to the Minister within the next week or two. Looking beyond that, the Minister clearly will be liaising with his counterpart in DOE, and then we'll be hopefully coming to announcing the detail of the scheme next month. At that point, we will also have to present legislation. This will have to be done through subordinate legislation, so we'll be presenting the regulations to the committee sometime in November, and clearly we'll want to have sessions associated with that. There'll be quite a complex set of regulations, I have to say. Some of our recent sets of regulations have been fairly straightforward. This will be quite complex because of the nature of the scheme. But having said that, we're also trying to keep it as simple as possible. This is a scheme that will be is there to help ratepayers. It's not providing extra financing to local government. It is a direct discount on rate bills to those ratepayers who would be affected, who would otherwise be affected by the boundary changes and by councils coming together. Other learning points we really took from the consultation, apart from the fact that let's have one scheme, was that many thought that we should extend the scheme so that it coincided with the new council term. And that's certainly something we will be putting to the Minister shortly. There was also the issue of whether there should be a threshold, and there was some support for applying a threshold if this allowed more of the support to be provided to those most affected. Although I think the majority did feel that there shouldn't be a threshold. That's really the kind of key messages we've taken out of the consultation. We think that we can provide a reasonable level of support within the available funding, and that's certainly our previous analysis has shown that. But as I say, we have to check that in relation to the new non-domestic revaluation data, because clearly the non-domestic revaluation will redistribute the tax base throughout Northern Ireland in relation to councils. So we've simply got to rework our figures. So that's where we are at the moment.
In terms of modelling then, Brian, what modelling has the department undertaken to estimate the protection that will go to each council area? Do you get a good sense of what districts will need it most?
Well, the council, the ratepayers that need it most are in relation to non-domestic ratepayers: Newton Abbey, Craigavon, Coleraine, Castlereagh, Lisburn, Strabane, Fermanagh, Larne, Dungannon, Macrofelt, Newry Mourne and North Down. And then in relation to domestic ratepayers, that would be Newton Abbey, Banbridge, Ballymoney, Coleraine, Castlereagh, Lisburn, Strabane, Fermanagh, Ballymena, Dungannon, Newry Mourne and Ards. Within that, of course, some of those are not significant. The significant ones are clearly the Castlereagh coming into Belfast and Lisburn, and also Fermanagh.
It's me.
And, you know, to give you an example, we have an allowable funding level of 30 million here. We think that the Lisburn and Castlereagh domestics on their own would take up to 3 million of that support. So, as I've said, if we apply this proportionately with the one scheme, that's the kind of level of support that would need to be provided.
In terms of the legislation that we brought forward, the regulations, how complex are they going to be? Could you perhaps elaborate on that a bit more? And
well,
what the detail of that will be?
what we're going to have to set out is a series of district rate discounts that will apply to ratepayers in each of the new council areas. And we'll have to provide the methodology for it and also the discount levels. So
a certain formula?
So there will be a formula applied to that, and the figures will be shown in the regulations.
John?
I'm just keen to know, Brian, is the 30 million that you've set aside, is it safe from cuts and budget pressures?
Well, nobody's been knocking at our door in relation to looking for it back. Yes. We are working on the assumption that it's secure. There was an executive decision taken in, I think, February 2012 in relation to that, because we had presented our analysis at that time and the executive agreed to set aside 30 million for the scheme. So that's our working assumption, and that's nobody has told us otherwise.
Fair enough. I hope your optimism's well placed.
And you're still optimistic 30 million will be enough to cover this?
Yeah, well, the analysis we presented to the executive back then was that it would certainly provide a 3-year scheme for everybody. There are steps that we are taking to try and make that go further. One of the changes we are proposing is to exclude all public sector property, and also exclude those properties.
I think somebody's looking at a discount for farmers.
Again.
Let's hope so.
Again. Well, they already get a 20% discount, but
Keep that sort of information to yourself, Brian. Yep,
I think we're looking to make that 30 million go as far as possible. We intend to, and the Minister still has to make a final decision on this, but to exclude public sector property, which is a reasonable saving. That could save us up to 3 million. There's also social sector standardisation, where the rates are already standardised across Northern Ireland, so we can discount that as well. So we think we can maybe get the scheme to go a bit further than that.
Okay. Peter?
Thank you. There's a couple of points. If we're looking, and obviously one of the responses in terms of the consultation response was to suggest that it fits in with the council term now in a 3-year period, i.e. so it's spread over 4 years rather than, but presumably that would be then the basis that, as it would be of a depreciating nature in terms of the reduction, it would mean that if that was the case, the year 4 would be a relatively small figure out of the 30 million, but presumably that would mean then it would shift the balance a little bit, so the 30 million wouldn't all be used up in the 3 year.
Well, that's a consideration in deciding what the steps are to be, and the Minister will be mindful of that, I'm sure, in making a decision. He hasn't made the decision yet, but
and I suppose in certain regards, I know John had mentioned earlier about the, shall we say, the security of the 30 million. I suppose in certain regards, one of the issues to some extent is that the 30 million is part of the overall budgetary pressures that are, if you like, leading to the certain level of Blackwell. It's actually the commitment to that which means then that overall there's about 200 million whenever you take into account welfare, and then the other pressures are coming from.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
something that there's clear commitment to.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's a commitment that has been there for a couple of years. We've known about this.
On the basis of the modelling, and obviously it's interesting that in terms of the level of detail that the regulations will go into, then if you like, will have on the face of it the specific sort of impact side of it rather than simply just the formula in that regard as the nature of it. You mentioned about, for example, that obviously given the scale and given the change on it, you mentioned for instance the Castlereagh Lisburn situation being obviously potentially if that model was adopted 3 million out of the 30 million. On the I suppose on the flip side of the coin, in terms of the breakdown between domestic and non-domestic sort of help, what would you see as the breakdown on that side of it?
I think there would be more provided to domestic ratepayers, but we're playing it equally.
Yeah.
But if you're asking me how does it fall?
Will have a certain level of impact,
How does it
yeah.
fall? I think there would be more going to the domestic side than to the non-domestic side. But to go back to what I was saying earlier, if we are to exclude public sector property, obviously that's an exclusion from non-domestic, so that in itself creates a saving.
That effectively then starts shifting a little bit of the balance.
Yeah.
Final question, just I suppose, and again to some degree it's I think it's, well, arguably a degree of red herring in certain regards. The reference in terms of a 1% threshold of, presumably on the basis that it wouldn't kick in unless there's 1% difference on it.
That's right.
Presumably by definition, whether that's adopted or not adopted is pretty minimal to things on it, because if you're talking about the difference is less than 1%, you're talking about 80% of 0.8%. It's going to be so...
You're exactly right, because you're dealing with the marginals anyway, so that marginal funding wouldn't go a long way.
That's what I was going to say. If it was, say, for the sake of argument, that was adopted as a threshold, a fairly, I wouldn't say pointless gesture, but it would be relatively minimalist.
It needs to be more than 1 or 2%, I think, to be quite significant in terms of. But this whole consultation was how do you distribute the support, and that was one issue that we raised. But I'd say some quite liked it. Certainly, Nilga commented favourably on it if it helped. I'm not sure that it helps much, which is the point I think you're making.
I noticed well, obviously in terms of broad, if you like, the two issues to some extent of the convergence between councils and then the boundary changes within that. I suppose the other point, just put on the record, obviously, whereas the focus is principally in boundary changes on the Castlereagh Lisburn. I think the only other area where actually there is a very geographically small impact in terms of population, but there's like 300 or 400 constituents moving from. No, I was going to say this is from North Down into Belfast.
Yeah. There's that, and there's also a pocket of ratepayers in Dungannon as well. So they will get proportionally more support because they would be they would otherwise be more affected by the boundary changes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Just in terms of the most affected and those most in need, Brian.
Yes.
What any safeguards could be put in place to help ensure that those most in need get the relief? Because if you're trying to accommodate a wide range of people in this scheme, how do you ensure that it doesn't take away from those most in need of relief?
Well, we will apply this proportionally, but another significant point is that there is a statutory review period in relation to the effectiveness of the scheme, which is written into the Local Government Act, and that requires the department after 2 years or mid-term or whatever it is to see how effective it is. So if there are people that are significantly affected and it's not doing the job, I think the department then has to do something about it. So,
in terms of the committee, is there anything you need us to do in the period leading up to the regulations being presented?
I don't think so. I'm happy to appear again, and once the Minister has made a policy decision, maybe that might be a helpful thing before we present the regulations. So I can talk you through the policy decision and or the way that the Minister wants to deal with that before we go to regulations. So we can do it in a two-stage way if that's helpful to the committee.
It's okay. Okay, Brian?
Okay,
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, members, moving on to next session, cross-departmental performance and savings delivery plans, briefing from the department. I can refer members to the DAP briefing paper, pages 110 through to 116 of your packs.
110, page 1.
Okay, members, can I welcome to the meeting Joanne McBurney, Head of Supply for the Central Expenditure Division in the Department, Agnes Lennon, also from CED, Preeta Miller, who we all know from the Finance Division and CSG, and Janice Marinowski, Head of the Financial Department, Financial Management. So you're all very welcome. Perhaps you want to make a brief presentation on the paper before we move to questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. As you're probably aware, following the draft budget 2011-15, departments were asked to publish draft savings delivery plans for consultation. And following agreement on the final budget, departments were asked to finalise and publish their STPs. I'd like to stress at this point that the primary responsibility for the identification and delivery of savings lies with the individual departments and ministers. But there are central monitoring arrangements in place, and our Minister reports biannually to the Executive and to this committee on the delivery of STPs, hence this update today. However, ministers are not required to participate in the monitoring, and it is somewhat disappointing that the Department of Education have not done so, but they're perfectly within their rights to do that. At the time of our paper, the Health Minister had not yet published his savings delivery plan for 2014-15, as Health prepare these on an annual basis. However, we've been informed that is due to be published within days. You will have seen the report that was forwarded to the committee by our Minister on the 8th of September, so I don't plan to go through that excuse me, in any detail. However, just the headline figures. Some 511.3 million of savings were achieved in 13-14, which represented 96.1% of the total departmental targets. 6 departments met their savings targets for 2013-14, while 3 departments actually exceeded their targets. That was DSD, OFM, DFM and FSA. However, 4 departments unfortunately failed to deliver the required savings. That was DOE, DOJ, DRD and the Public Prosecution Service. In the current year, 2014-15, savings of 432.7 million are forecast to be delivered, which represents 97% of the savings target of 446.2 million. The most significant shortfall expected relates to DOJ, who forecast that it does not anticipate delivery in full of the net savings expected from the prison service staff exit scheme. Departments have also identified a number of adverse implications for frontline services, and a table has been included at the end of the report listing these impacts. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Previously, departmental officials assured the committee that the department is on track to achieve its own target savings of £13.4 million. Is there any scope at all to exceed those saving targets?
Right, I'm going to turn to Preeta to answer behalf of the department.
Yes, hopefully, Chair, you recall at the October Monitoring Committee we were recently at, given the pressures that we're facing this year with the additional budget reductions required by the Executive, we couldn't guarantee that additional savings will be made this year. We obviously would look to continue to try to achieve those, primarily through exiting leases as early as possible, but wouldn't like to commit to savings over and above what we're signed up to deliver.
Also, given that 9 of the departments have either achieved or exceeded their savings targets in 2013-14, how confident can we be that the targets were challenging enough in the first place, given that high level of success?
Well, at the time of the budget, it was left for individual departments and their ministers to determine the level of savings they were required to make to achieve their objectives within the reduced budget they were given. So I suppose in those terms we didn't have a say in how challenging or not the savings were. However, as we move into the next budget period, it's obvious that savings needing to be delivered will be very challenging for all departments.
So you're confident then that the targets for 14-15, including DFP, are challenging enough?
Well, the 14-15 budget was set some time ago. The savings delivery plan targets were probably not going to be sufficient to allow departments to meet all the challenges they're facing this year. So in that respect, they were challenging probably at the time they were agreed and set. But as we move forward into a more challenging budget position, more will need to be done.
Okay, Deputy Chair.
Thanks very much. You know, given the fact that all departments except two have had considerable cuts to their budget, how realistic is it to expect them to continue to reach targets for savings delivery under those circumstances?
I think there's sort of two aspects to that. The savings that they have planned to make will obviously be made and will help to contribute to them living within the budget that was set at the start of the year. With more reductions being made, departments will be required to make further savings. And I think in the environment, it's going to be harder and harder to achieve those from reductions in administration or bureaucracy, and it will have some impact on other services. And it'll be up to individual ministers to try as far as possible to mitigate that impact.
But is it, you know, as I say, under the current circumstances, is it realistic to ask departments to squeeze further savings when they're already under huge pressure? And frontline services are being affected currently.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very difficult for departments, and obviously it's something we wouldn't want to do. But with the current challenges facing the executive, we have very limited resources, and action will have to be taken to live within those resources. And we'll have to work closely together to try and mitigate the impact as far as we can. There's no doubt that it's going to be extremely challenging, and it's not a situation anybody would want to find themselves in. But unfortunately, it's where we are.
But I agree with you that it's going to be extremely challenging. But you know, is it achievable?
I think the longer there are delays in giving departments certainty, the harder it is going to be for them to achieve that. Obviously, we're more than halfway through the year, so it is going to be particularly challenging now to meet significant reductions in 14-15. But with a limited budget available, we are going to have to make efforts to do that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. In terms of the savings for 2013-14, Dodge is the shortfall is 7.2 million. How much of that would relate to the higher than anticipated cost of the prison service staff exit scheme?
Sorry, just check the figures. I don't have the actual breakdown of that in front of me. Sorry, turn the
I don't think we have in front of us precisely the amount for the prison service staff exit scheme.
No, we don't have the precise figures, and the DOJ committee would have that, or we can get back to you on that. However, I do think it made up a significant amount of that shortfall, and it was due to them increasing the scope of the scheme to allow more people to leave. They increased it from, I think it was 360 to 524. So it wasn't that the scheme was failing to deliver, it was that they changed the scope of the exit scheme, and that has changed the profile of savings. So there will be more savings overall, it'll just fall later in the period.
In terms of the risks to delivery, what are the considerable risks for DRD in relation to the 20 billion release of value from the Belfast Harbour Commissioners?
Courts as well.
That was something that in 13-14 was covered by a bid from the executive to meet that. DRD are still raising that as a pressure in 14-15. Now, obviously, it'll be up to the executive to decide whether or not they provide funding to DRD for that, but DRD do see it as a significant pressure, and therefore it's a risk to their savings plans.
And in terms of the Department of Health, have they now prepared their 14-15 STP?
We have been informed that it is due to be published within the next day or so, but as it hasn't been published, we haven't had sight of it yet. But they have told us that it has been agreed by their minister and it's due to be published, and I hope that's the case.
And have Ian's had any view of that yet? Or
well, we haven't seen it
nothing
yet.
At all. Okay. Any other members? Michaela?
Yeah, thank you, Joanne. Does the department envisage, or are they expecting to have to surrender funding to make up for possible shortfalls in other departments' budgets as a result of the ongoing cut to the block grant? Does that have an impact?
Sorry, I think asking departments to make further reductions. Yes, I think further reductions are unfortunately going to be inevitable. The quantum of that will be a matter for the executive to decide, but I think it will be inevitable.
Okay, Judith?
I see the little section in there on the impact on frontline services. You know, are we confident that the majority of the savings delivered are actually due to, you know, efficiencies and, you know, improved sort of processes rather than just simply cutting things that they should be doing under the PFG.
Yeah.
At the time of the budget, when the Savings Delivery Plan guidance was issued, it was made very clear to departments that the majority of them should be from reduction in administration and improvements in efficiency, and that every effort should be made to minimise the impact on frontline services. It was recognised that the situation was different than in previous years, where they were to be pure efficiencies and that there may be more risks around that, and that's why we asked them when reporting on their savings delivery plans to identify any risks or impacts to frontline services. So our supply colleagues would have talked with the departments through the regular stock takes, and this table represents what we are aware of as being those impacts, and we will continue to report on any impacts on that.
Because it might be useful to actually, I mean, okay, we've got potential impact on frontline services, but to actually identify, so say X amount of pounds was saved by one department, how much of this was related to each of those things that they refer to. It would be more helpful, you know, for us to be able to see that, rather than just assuming, oh, well, there's only a small part of it. Or
I would imagine that that would be something that departments would share with their own committees, and that those committees may be willing to share with you. It's certainly something we can look at in future when commissioning this, but an awful lot of the, I mean, we're providing a summary of all the departments. A lot of the details should be discussed in great detail with their own committees, who should be aware of that, but it's certainly something we can consider.
I think, Chair, that's something that we should seek from the other committees to find out if they have had a breakdown of that, for us to have a look at it overall.
Okay, members content with that?
Some of the committees don't have it because they're not participating.
Yeah, exactly. But
Okay, members, any other questions?
Can I just ask one more? Yeah. The Controller and Auditor General office did a report on savings delivery plans. What improvements or changes have been brought about in the operation of the plan since then? One of the criticisms was that frontline services were being cut in some instances to achieve savings, whereas the criteria which had been laid down, I think, by a government body, was that frontline services should be protected in this.
Yeah, the Audit Office report was on the efficiency delivery plans in the previous budget period, but it does, you're right, it does cut across what we're doing now, and that was why our guidance going out for savings delivery plans was very specific, that they should try to avoid any impact on frontline services, and that is why we've included asking for the risks to frontline services in our monitoring of that. Obviously, it will be a matter for the individual departments and ministers how they decide to make the savings, but we have asked to be made aware of any risk to that, so as we can report it through yourselves and to the executive.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, members. All right. Thank you all very much. Okay, members, can I seek agreement to forward the DFP briefing paper and a copy of today's Hansard to other statutory committees for information and scrutiny at a departmental level as applicable? Agreed? Agreed. Moving on to the next session, performance against business plan targets, corporate services division. I can refer you to papers pages 110 to 116, and the corporate services division scorecard at pages 117 to 123, and the secretariat paper that was referred to earlier. Okay. Morning. You're all very welcome.
Thank you.
Do you want to give us a brief overview before we move into questions?
Yes, Chair, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to talk to you this morning about our business plan and our, well, Q1 performance targets I think you had received copies of. I think if you, with your permission, I'll just maybe set it in a little bit of context for you about the structure of the division and maybe some of our key work priorities, and then look at the Q1 monitoring and concentrate probably on the ones that are really amber and red within that. So in terms, first of all, of Corporate Services Division, well, I suppose really we have the responsibility for most of the support services for DFP internally, and that covers the human resource, workforce planning, ICT services through our information systems branch, areas like accommodation, health and safety and security, and then our corporate improvement centre, and the Minister's Office, Assembly Office, communication and support for the Perm Sex Office and the Departmental Board. So it's kind of all of those support functions really. some of our key work areas, I suppose, in terms of the real priorities for us this year in the HR field, that would have been around, it's for us around sick absence management and trying to improve our sick absence record, and that's a big issue obviously right across the NICS. And workforce planning is another area we're putting a lot of effort into. Information assurance again is another key for us, and the department's quality improvement programme, I suppose, is where we're really trying to drive innovation and improvement across the department. So they're kind of our key work areas. In terms of our balanced scorecard that you sort of got copies of, I suppose I'd maybe make two observations. The targets within it are probably quite detailed and at a level really that allows the staff right across the division in all those different work areas to be able to relate through. So there's a lot of probably what would be lower level targets in there, but as I say, it's so that staff can make that connection in there. The other thing is that it's structured in such a way, I suppose, to reflect the fact that we are a support division. So a lot of the targets that fall within the results section are really where we're supporting the departmental level targets and the ones that are the outward facing ones, whereas the other three quadrants, sort of the customers, the organisation and people, and the internal processes are really how we deal with our own internal processes in the division and deal with our own staff. So that's just to give a little bit of structure. So if you're happy, turn to maybe just the monitoring report, as I said, and go through some of the areas in that. I'm quite happy, obviously, to take any questions when we do this. First quadrant then, as I say, the results section, very much dealing with a wide range of target issues because it is the sort of departmental targets. So we're picking up a lot of areas here around customer satisfaction surveys, sick absence management, performance management and communication, training, IT delivery, all those targets are all in there. As you can see, in the main, quite good performance here. They're very much green across the board, with the exception of our one amber. And the one green target, with your permission, I'd just draw your attention to maybe, is R201, and that's our sick absence one, and that's because, I mean, as I said, it's quite a key priority for us. We have struggled in previous years to achieve the sick absence target, but we made quite a change in 2013 to our procedures, where we introduced a partnership approach with line managers and give them a bigger role in the early stages of sick absence, and we're starting to see improvements as a result of that. So this is the first time at this stage of the year where we're actually still being predicted to meet our target. So that's one of the greens that we're hoping, I suppose, will stay that way. But the amber then really is in relation to our data protection, FOI and environmental information regulation requests. And it's really about compliance with the targets in there. This is an area that we've had to look at and concentrate on, and to review our procedures to try and improve our performance. Now, we're obviously getting close to sort of Q2 monitoring now, and we are starting to see some improvement here. But it's something we are going to have to keep a focus on as we go through the year. I suppose then going to the next quadrant, again, there's just the three targets here under the customer, two of them green in relation to customer satisfaction surveys. The one that is amber is in relation to how we capture our improvements from the customer surveys. So it's really about, I suppose, the discipline of making sure that when we recognise we need to do something and make those improvements, that we capture it on our monitoring tool, and we haven't been good enough about doing that. So again, something that we've focused on, and it is one that I would expect to see probably moving to green now at Q2 monitoring, because we've done that. If I move on to the internal processes then, IP 102 there is again coming back to the one we talked about earlier, the FOI request, but that's where this is sort of the division's own requests and the ones that we receive that we have to respond to, as opposed to the wider departmental ones. So again, an area that we're focusing on to make sure that we reach the compliance targets there. And one that we're seeing improvement on, but I think there'll be more work for us as we go through the year on that front. The last section then, the organisation and people, is probably the more colourful of the SEC quadrants for us. The first one there, and it's probably our only red, and is in relation to performance management. And just to set that, I suppose, in a little bit of context for you, that's quite a challenging target that we set, and it really flows from the NICS People Strategy and People Plan, and it's about us trying to make sure that we comply with performance management and get our staff, make sure that they have their PPAs, their personal performance agreements and PDPs early in the year, and that they get other in-year reviews as we go through it. We didn't meet the target in that what we were trying to do was get 90% of those within the appropriate timescales. The department didn't meet that, but it is something, while we've vastly improved our performance, it's something that we've raised really to board level, and we're monitoring every month. And I suppose it's on the basis that we need staff to understand exactly what their performance agreements are, and it's employee engagement as much as anything else. It's to show that we do treat it as a priority. So, as I say, unfortunately, it's been read there. We're concentrating now on the target just below it because we're at the next stage of in-year reviews. They're due to be done this month. So we're concentrating on trying to hit the 90% there, which will bring us back on track with the whole reporting cycle for the year. To move then probably just to the other two ambers that are in that section, which are linked in that they are about this engagement with staff and addressing the issues raised through the staff consultation exercise and the staff attitude survey. Again, this relates probably more to one of the earlier targets, where this is about us really capturing anything that we do as an improvement onto our monitoring tool, so as it's obvious to staff that yes, we listened and we actually did something, and here was the result of it. So again, very much how we manage our procedures within the division, and an area we've concentrated on, and I would again expect to see improvement there now in Q2. So as I say, that's probably a quick overview from my part, but I'm quite happy to take, or for us to take any questions, or if there's anything you'd like more detail on.
Can I just ask as well, in terms of a common format for reporting performance, I mean, obviously you have the red, amber, green, the RAG status. How might CSD ensure consistency across business areas in terms of that reporting?
Okay, well, we have quite the business planning within the department is all managed through this corporate application. So we have obviously the different levels of it, the departmental level, and then the lower levels that sit below this. The target number and the colours there are really about the risk and us assessing the risk, whereas the status column is whether or not we're meeting the target, and we manage that through the side of the corporate application. Anything that's risks that are flagged up there, there's a decision taken, should it be raised up a level effectively, and that's how we manage this through to the board process. So really, I suppose, in terms of how it's done across the department, it's all managed through that corporate application process. We start off with our high-level departmental draft plan. That's cascaded down so that every business area can contribute to that, and then that's worked down from there through into the staff's personal performance agreements.
Mm-hmm. Deputy Chair.
Sorry. Yes. With regard to the 6 monthly report to the Permanent Secretary, can I ask you for clarification on a number of the improvements arising from the business area improvements plans? Could you give us further details on those?
In relation to our own corporate services division?
In relation to the business area improvement plans.
Okay, well, I suppose that's really our quality improvement process, and every area of the department has to go through self-assessment in relation to their business area. What that does is that produces a list of improvements for the area, really driven by discussions with staff. That's captured on our quality improvement tool, and which and then the business areas have to report through on that when they make the improvements and what the result of that has been. That's then, it's our corporate improvement centre really, then they're managing that across the department, pulling that together and providing the report through to the Permanent Secretary. Linda might be able to give do you want an actual example of some of the improvements that have flowed from that?
Yeah, that would be useful.
Okay.
What we do whenever the self-assessment has taken place, we ask staff are involved. we take a cross-diagonal slice of staff in each business area, and we ask them to identify in terms of impact on the business, whether it would have a high impact or, and we class that as a red, or green, as a nice to have, and amber somewhere in between. And the red impact improvements, so far we have carried out self-assessments with around 25 business areas in DFP, and we have about 190 red impact improvements within those business areas. Of those red impact improvements, they are making good progress. About 70 of them have been completed. About 33 are ongoing, or they're doing some work in, and then the others would be maybe the self-assessments have just been finished, and they haven't been bringing them forward as yet. So the sort of things that are coming out at a corporate level are issues around HR Connect, training, and a lot of communication issues, or maybe misunderstanding, by the staff of the process. So we've been able to go back on those sort of things. Other things that are coming out are where staff are actually saying, we need to look at the structure of our section, or the division, and that will be followed through then with organisational reviews. So there's a lot of activity going on across the department, including our own division directorate.
And is there any evidence of the improvements having impact on, say, customer services?
Well, what we have done, some of the improvements coming through are where staff feel, that they could do better in relation to customer service. We have also asked for their customer feedback to be added to the improvement plan. So any improvements coming out of that, the divisions will take forward. And what we're seeing is things where staff are looking at using improvement tools like customer journey mapping, bringing the customer in, talking them through the process, and finding out, where the difficulties are. So some business areas are looking at that type of exercise.
Okay, and there's obviously quite a bit of work still to be done there. Well, why then have you given it green status?
It's green in terms of just the report to the Permanent Secretary.
Yeah,
so that would be my responsibility as head of Corporate Improvement Centre to liaise with the Permanent Secretary and the board. And what the purpose of that really is to report to David Sterling on how business areas are engaging with this programme. And if there's some areas who are maybe dragging their heels a bit, then I would flag that to him.
Each business improvement plan that sits below that in the business areas as well is separately monitored to show what percentage progress has been made with the improvements that have been identified, and that monitoring tool is available on the internet for everybody in the business area and for the department as a whole. So we're constantly looking to see at what percentage have the improvements actually been implemented to actually make sure that we get the outputs from that.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Thanks, Chair.
And in terms of the sickness absence target,
yes.
I would say the end-year performance for the last financial year was 9.4 days.
Yes. Yeah.
And the target was 7.6.
Yes, we missed the target.
You're indicating that based on the first quarter, it could be 7.3, which would be highly impressive. Is there any caveats to that?
I think there's always caveats with sick absence. And that's why I'm sort of loath to probably be too overly confident with it, because, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I suppose anybody can face quite a serious illness, short notice, and we've no real control over that. But we have done quite a bit to improve. There's a lot of evidence out there in terms of managing sick absence, that the more you interact with people while they're on sick absence, understand what the reasons are, and try to work with them, I suppose, to get them back as early as possible, or slightly earlier maybe even than they would have intended, that all helps. And I think that's where we're seeing the benefit of the line manager involvement, and even the staff. We're going through an evaluation process at the minute to see how that's helping with staff, and there is evidence there that staff do feel that they can get back to work easier because management understand what's wrong and can adjust things for them to try and get them back. So that is definitely helping. But I don't think I'd like to pin my colours to the mast quite yet. The way that prediction is, it's worked through by NISRA, so it does take account of sort of previous trends and that, but we're about to hit winter and we're about to hit the time when sick absence sometimes does take a hike. So we have never, last year we were already predicted to miss target at this stage, so I take reassurance by the fact that at this point in the year we're predicted to meet target, and with a little bit of scope there as well, in that, you know, so we watch it with interest.
But in terms of the strategy that DFP are adopting in regard to this, is that something that has been replicated in other departments this year too? Probably not in all departments. I mean, each department, I suppose, is responsible for how it manages its own. I mean, obviously, everybody is contributing to the overall targets, and there is an emphasis, I must admit, right across all the other departments. But we have very much moved to a business partnering model in terms of delivery of HR and DFP in general. And I suppose it was a build, really, on that process. We did receive resistance, I must admit, at the start from line managers, in that they felt that this was too much of a burden and there were difficulties with that. But we persisted, and we're seeing the benefits, I think. And I think line managers themselves, we're seeing other added benefits, because just compliance with sick absence procedures and that are starting to improve as well, because line managers are now clearer that they have a role to play in this, and that when they get to do a review meeting, it's important that the absence is up to date and they know what's gone on. So we're seeing other additional benefits as well. Okay, Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I suppose just to pick up on that bit as well, first of all, in terms of the sickness absence side of it, and I appreciate you've heavily caveated this is, shall we say, early stages, and you'd indicate to the Chair that I feel like not every department was following the same sort of process as such, but given that I suppose that on the face of it at least you appear to have had a reasonable amount of success with the particular strategy that's been approached, I mean, do you have a particular strategy to at least help share best practice amongst other departments? I appreciate to some extent there will be internal decisions taken by different departments as to how they implement things, but it does strike me that where there's a particular strategy which works, it is likely therefore to have some level of benefits elsewhere. Maybe you could outline what strategy going forward you would have with that sort of sharing of information.
Yes, I mean, and we do. I suppose a lot of that is coordinated through the corporate HR side, where they are. I mean, I did say it was quite a priority right across the civil service. It's been reported right through to PSG level, and we would contribute to those type of reports to show, you know, what we've done and how we are making improvements. Some of the departments we've been quite closely working with, for example, DSD, they're quite interested because through the HR Directors Group we share information, and they've been quite interested. They've done a very similar approach to us, and they're now looking to see, sort of, you know, interested in what we've done to see if that can be of assistance to them. So, I mean, different departments, yes, you're right, have taken different strategies, but that is all being shared through those sorts of forum to see. And I suppose ultimately the results as we get closer towards the end of the year will start to tell maybe what has worked more than others. I suppose you do have to also remember that departments have very different structures and business models and very different issues around sick absence depending on the nature of the departments. So what works for us might not work for all departments.
I mean, are you in a position as part of that, I suppose, just again to drill down that, if you have a sort of a particular, shall we say, coordinated plan that will involve possibly different elements to that plan, is it sort of is it difficult to disaggregate that in terms of where you're seeing the particular impact is? Because you may end up doing a package of 5 things, and it may be that, but it may be difficult to analyse the individual impacts. That you may have a situation that, say, 3 of them are very productive, 1 maybe counterproductive, and a 5th may have no impact at all. But because perhaps you're feeling just simply the cumulative impact, I mean, it's difficult to disaggregate those elements to see, therefore, what is the, I wouldn't say necessarily golden bullet, but you know, what makes the major differences.
Yes, I think that's quite right. I mean, when you do change a number of things, it's never quite clear exactly what's causing the sort of the actual impact. I suppose what we've done, though, at the minute, I did mention that we were in the process of evaluating that change, and I think that too, that's something we thought was very important to do so that we could share it with other departments. So we're looking to see, as part of that, now a lot of that is looking to see how how our performance has changed, but also gathering information from the people involved in the process as to what impact it's actually having on them. So we're pulling that all together, and we'll be sharing all that with the other departments as well. But you're right, it's very difficult. A lot of, you know, I mean, we're seeing the improvement, whether it's all down to that or the other issues, it's very difficult to say.
Asking maybe on a different subject, one of the areas where you've got a green target, but there's relatively little information, R3.11, which is on the workplace utilisation targets.
Okay.
Now, I suppose we've got advice, I think, very recently that across the civil service as a whole, there's only about 20% of the estate meets that target. I wonder, first of all, could you give indications as to, you know, what the corresponding figure, or indeed how accommodation is being dealt with in terms of DFP on that, and given, I suppose, and appreciate that all these things are sort of prescient of information, but whenever obviously just simply the comment is on track for achievement, doesn't really give a great deal of detail. And I wonder if you maybe expand on that a little bit.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't have those sorts of figures, but I suppose for us in terms of on track for achievement, we're very much...
Well, you know the figures, but...
For DFP, sorry, that I can quote to you, yes.
I was just going to say, without, I suppose, getting the exact figures, if we're talking about across the civil service estate, 20% meeting its targets, is that qualitatively different with DFP? You know, is it a much higher figure with DFP? Maybe you're reluctant to commit yourself in relation to it. I'm just wondering, to what extent, if it is something of a similar nature, is it a bit optimistic to be talking about on track for achievement, if that is the case?
I suppose really are on track for achievement in relation to this. We, the way we are operating is that as any of our accommodation comes up, particularly with leased accommodation, any leases that are coming up for renewal, we are looking at not renewing those leases effectively and moving the people that are within them in the DFP area, getting them moved into buildings that sort of are part of the problem. So we're contributing to that overall movement. We have had a number of properties where there have been DFP staff in leased buildings, and we're also working on another 2 areas that we know are coming up. So I suppose we're on track for achievement in that we are not renewing the leases and we are moving those people as they come up, which fits with the strategy.
Effectively, the strategy is supposed to make that change each occasion as an opportunity arises.
Yes, so because we're just working from a departmental perspective, each time that arises, we're making sure that the people that we're working on it at an early stage to get suitable accommodation within the estate.
Yeah,
those
and I appreciate to some extent, therefore, as opportunities arise, you'll look to make that change within there. But is there anything which can be done slightly more proactively, which is obviously taking whatever accommodation there and trying to either adapt that, or indeed in terms of from that point of view of utilisation, perhaps shift around staff within that using the existing strategy? Because I appreciate if it's simply a question of whenever a particular opportunity arises in terms of a particular building which isn't suitable, that can be got rid of, and a different movement on that basis on it. That would be quite a slow process on that basis.
Yeah, I suppose that the wider issue, and the one you refer to, Properties Division, would be the area that really is dealing with that and looking to, I suppose, maximise on any of those sorts of opportunities that would be available for us in the department. And looking just at the internal sort of accommodation, probably quite a small relative footprint in terms of accommodation and very centralised in that respect too. So really our concentration is on the areas where there are leased buildings, making sure that we get the people from them. I mean, it doesn't make sense to leave ahead of the lease, so really we're making sure we're geared up to do that, and that's really what that target's about there.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, Adrian.
Thanks, Chair. You touched on the personal performance targets, and I know you gave us a wee bit of detail on it, but can you drill down in a wee bit more to it and give us what actions actually are, detailed actions you're going to take to try and rectify it?
Okay, on the performance management piece.
Yes.
Well, as I say, I know it does sit at red, albeit that it has been quite a substantial improvement. Really, the way we have tried to make a difference here is by raising it right up the priority level of the department. So each director is getting a report on a monthly basis as to the level of PPAs and the level of performance management that has been completed within their area. We're also providing them then lists of the staff that haven't had them yet completed, and they're going away to put the pressure on effectively. And I suppose that's been the key way of doing this, that we're trying to make it part and parcel of the culture of the organisation, that these are done on time and that they're completed for all staff. And we're just having to drive that right from the top of the organisation to make a difference.
Is staff resisting it, or what's the reason?
No, I don't think that. No, I don't think it would be fair to say. Well, I suppose there are line managers, and particularly in some of our areas. I mean, the first stage of the process has to be done in April, and there are some areas of the department where that is extremely busy from a business perspective in that particular month. So there are some line managers, particularly ones that would have larger numbers of staff, where it can be difficult for them. But that doesn't go right across the department, needless to say. So we're trying to push to make sure that happens. There will always be difficulties if there are line managers or staff, for example, on sick absence, or if somebody's on a maternity leave and that. So there will always be reasons why they can't be done on time. But that's why we had a 90% target. You know, that was to allow for those sorts of times when there was just a very valid reason for not completing them. So we will continue to push to try and reach the 90%. And as I say, our in-year reviews, anybody that gets an in-year review has to have the earlier process now completed, so we're going to concentrate now on that over the next month. They would be due for completion by the end of October. So we'll look to that to see how we improved.
On the 59% or something?
Well, the 59%, yes, has already improved. Latest figures that I have, we're over 80% now, so we're much closer to the 90. Can't change the target status because we didn't achieve it, by the end of June. But we were still concentrating on making sure we haven't just sort of left it behind. We're still concentrating on making sure that we do get to the 90, albeit later than we would have hoped.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, Kayla, then Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jan, and apologies I missed the beginning of your presentation. On the target number OP202, the amber status, in terms of only 24% of business areas are compliant or are complying with the departmental target. I suppose that's slightly disappointing. Can you give me more detail and maybe on which businesses are not compliant and the reasons for this, and obviously actions to ensure compliance and impact on the staff morale?
Okay. I had mentioned sort of just earlier on that this is as much a procedural target as anything else, and the compliance here really is about making sure that when they make the improvements they put it onto the monitoring tool. So that it's, as much as anything else, it's much clearer to staff, because I'm going back to what Linda had said, a lot of our issues around the quality improvement is communication. So we were very clear here that we wanted to make sure that where there were improvements, that it's communicated and it's visible to staff. So this was really, it's not so much the improvements haven't been happening, it's more that they haven't taken the last step, which is to record. Yes, a process one. And I think probably in that respect for a lot of our business areas, because it was quite a low, we were on quite a low percentage here. So it basically it really wasn't a priority for them, I suppose. But we're making the argument about why we feel it's important to communicate, and we're pushing and reminding people to do that. I think we're already seeing quite an improvement in that area.
It's
Linda,
about
is that
50% now.
You know, so but it's a process, and I think it's quite important to
have you a time to get that process to the end, or is it just a work in progress?
I suppose the next step for us is, if we don't feel we're making improvement, our next step would be to raise the level of it within the department. So effectively, we look to see the final Q2 target, and then we need to take a decision as to whether or not we feel we're still making progress, or whether we need to raise it to board level, in which case each director then would be responsible for making sure that it did happen by Q3. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Paul. Thank you very much. Just on the customer survey, what specific groups participated in the customer surveys?
Okay. There's a combination of different customer surveys, I suppose, going on. So, again, because of the structure of the department, I mean, we've some obviously very big forward-facing customer areas, and they would have quite detailed customer surveys. Some of our more internal areas, like ourselves, our surveys would be around speaking to the different areas of the department that we interact with. But we've set a standard set of core questions that everybody must do a survey on and report the results on. So that kind of forms the core of our customer survey piece. And then, as I say, there are other business areas that will be much more detailed after that, because they have very forward-facing areas like LPS, in the ESS, where they have quite a large customer base, and therefore even more critical, I suppose. And they would be set up to do much more detailed customer surveys. But all of that's reported and captured through on our improvement tool, so that we know what's going on and what the activity is across the department.
And during compiling that data and that information, is there recurring themes coming back, or issues that seem to be keeping showing their head again? And if they are, what measures are put in place to actually identify them and then ensure that the issues that have been raised are addressed?
Yeah. I think a lot of the surveys are probably have concentrated more on service delivery in terms, like answering calls within a certain length of time. That I think the key to what you're talking about and what we're looking at more closely is how we handle our complaints, because that's quite a source of actual real issues in and around that. And we are looking at the minute to see how we make sure that we're capturing the complaints, looking for trends within that, and looking for how we're improving that. So that's an area that we're actually looking at the minute to try and improve. I'm not sure, Linda, if you would have any examples of the sort of things that are coming through on that.
Well, our customer survey, the feedback from last year was very good. And when it was discussed at departmental board, we wanted to explore more, as Anne said, the customer complaint side, because there's a rich source of information there. The types of complaints that are coming through, we haven't captured yet corporately, but we're looking at a process in which to do that. But they would be process issues, and low response times, that type of thing that would be coming through. But they are dealt with then by the respective directorates.
Is there any mechanism within the process to pick up? And I appreciate some of the customers are actually people within departments.
Yes.
But some of the customers are general public.
Yeah.
And on the cases of where the general public, and it's one of the frustrations that I get all the time. You've mentioned about calls being answered in time. They might well be answered by an automated process in time. And the number of people who you actually, and I know this to be fact, who do not like using these menus. Yeah. And the menu system, which has been automated. In fact, a lot of private companies are going away from them back to the old receptionist, because they found that it has not been necessarily good. People tend to hang up if they don't get, and the automated system has left an opportunity for people to have a message on their desk phone all the time. And they're sitting in their office, but they have a message on their desk, won't leave a message, so as they can answer it whenever it suits them, not necessarily when it suits the customer. And that's a big problem. I've encountered it myself many times, to such a degree where I did attempt to contact an office one time, and it's not that far from me. So I left the phone ringing, I got in the car and drove up, and I was in the office, and I said, by the way, that call is me. And the guy actually, oh sorry, but I'm telling you, that's exactly what does happen. And I think it's something that we need to actually, is there any mechanism to pick up those sorts of direct questioning? Because how are we doing things better?
I think Linda did refer there to, we had quite an interesting discussion on the outputs of our customer survey, because they were good, so good. And really we did challenge ourselves in that respect then. Well, are we asking the right questions? Because I mean our survey was things like, well, is the call being answered and that? And that is why we started to look and put more of a focus on the complaint side, to see if there's information in there about, and I think it is particularly important, this one, on the customer facing, the external customer facing piece. So we are looking at, and that, I mean, I know that our business areas are, you know, the likes of LPS and ASS are more geared up to do that, but we are looking to see the complaints piece. I think that was where we felt it was the best opportunity to try and get behind some of those issues and see if there were people who felt that, well, look, they just didn't feel it was an appropriate service for them for whatever reason, and if there is something there for that we need to look at or do more on.
Thank you.
Okay. Finally, in terms of the 3.03, I mean, I take it in terms of data protection and the environmental information regulations that those requirements are being met, and the issue is just with the FOI responses.
I'd say that's probably, yeah, off the top of my head, I'd say that's probably a fair comment. Yes, I think our main issues, we don't get a lot on the environmental side, obviously, so it is the FOI that we'd be concentrating mainly on in relation to that. I suppose for myself, and that's on a departmental level, for myself, the data protection impacts slightly more because of the HR piece, and because there's a lot, we would deal with a lot of personal information on that side, and some of the data protection requests can be quite complex and a lot of information to go through. That's no excuse, needless to say, obviously, because there are the compliance, and that's what we're really trying to focus on. But yes, in the main, I would say FOI.
And what is the issue with the FOI?
I suppose it has been well, we haven't met our compliance target. We have requests that have gone beyond the 20-day limit, and so we are looking to see, it's a combination sometimes of the nature of the request, it's our processes within the department, and in terms of getting the drafts done and the approvals done through that. So we've been looking at the whole, our process and that, to see, can we tighten those up and how can we try to improve.
Yeah. So how many FOI requests have you received, and how many have went over the 20-day limit?
I wouldn't have the total for the department in terms of how many we have received, but in terms of the ones that have gone over the 20-day limit, at the minute I think we're on, for the whole department, I think we're on 20. The last check that we were on 27. I have it here. That's an improvement on where we were, but it's still, as I say, that's why I'm saying we're still focusing on that to try and make sure that we...
What percentage would that be of the overall?
I don't have the actual figure. I can get that for you. Yeah, I'll provide that for you. Yes. Yeah. It's obviously it's a moving beast, if you know what I mean, because the the requests are coming in and going through the process, and a large percentage of them are going out. But I will see if I can get some sort of way of capturing that for you.
What is the reason for the non-compliance? Is it the detail of the FOI requests? Is it staff and personnel? What exactly is it? It can be different reasons, and it can be, I suppose, getting it right through the process and through to the stage, the approval stage, and getting it back out again. So it is an area that we have looked at our processes to see. Therefore, do we need to be getting the early stages done quicker and through to allow for those sorts of times. So we've really been reviewing the right across the piece on it, even looking to see if there are maybe some ones
some particular categories in it that we could deal with quicker and get those, and then concentrate on the more complex ones. So that's the sort of areas we're looking at the minute.
Okay, members? Okay. We may send you some other requests in terms of written requests for
Yes, no
information.
problem. Yes, we'll do.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, members, moving on to the next item, the review of the operation of the Barnett formula, consideration of draft terms of reference. I advise members of the committee's decision to proceed with an inquiry into how the operation and administration of the Barnett formula might be improved. The draft terms of reference has been prepared for consideration at page 125. Can I advise members that in view of the topicality of the issue, it's proposed to proceed along the lines of a short and timely review leading to a plenary debate possibly before or shortly after Christmas recess, as opposed to a long drawn-out formal inquiry. This approach would involve commissioning research and taking evidence from a small number of expert witnesses rather than issuing a public call for evidence. The research and evidence would be published online together with a short review paper to inform the plenary debate. Can I also advise members that the intention would be to inform the Executive's thinking on the matter in the context of the wider engagement and devolution arrangements and the debate on constitutional reform across the water. Have members had time to look at the terms of reference, and do we have any views on it?
Have we much input in relation to changing the terms of reference?
Sorry?
We wouldn't have much input in changing the terms of reference to the Barnett formula.
Terms of reference for our committee. It's terms of reference for our inquiry.
That's all right. Got it.
I think also be important to look at the level of need for public service provision required locally. I don't know, Shane, do you have any views in terms of if that's already covered?
It's been drafted, Chair, just in a general way to cover, any issues that come up in the evidence to get, in order to allow flexibility in that regard, rather than being too specific. But it's in terms of the relative need. So just to remind members, there was a panel of experts back in 2012, and they argued that Barnett formula has been very generous to Northern Ireland up to this point, but Gerald Holtham from Wales had been responsible for developing some indicators of relative need and using those in terms of the Welsh situation. And from memory, there were population, health, deprivation or poverty, and sparsity, that's geographic spread of population. Those four indicators, and based on those they had figured out that Wales was slightly below in terms of its need, was below the level of funding that it was receiving. Northern Ireland was just coming to a point where it probably is at the point where it's getting funded based on relative need using those indicators, but into the future, because Barnett leads to convergence with spending per head in terms of average spending per head, or in the UK, or into the future it could go in against Northern Ireland's best interests. So from that perspective, there's different ways of measuring needs. So rather than being too specific, the terms of reference just kind of keep it general. But it could be tweaked here and there. And also the issues that come up in terms of the administration of the Barnett formula. There have been instances where there has been what is termed Barnett bypass, where the goalposts essentially had been shifted in terms of the normal arrangements, and there's issues around the general lack of transparency and lack of data on calculations and so forth, and also maybe the lack of influence that the executive has over such issues. So that they have been raised in the past as well by various experts.
Chair, I suppose to pick up the point of the clerk in relation to I mean, it may be useful to have the terms. The terms are sort of quite general in their nature, and it may be some merit in that, because if you had something very specific, for instance, about need or relative need, I think to really then get a full answer on that, you would need quite a lot of exploration of it. Now, if there's off-the-shelf stuff, I think that's quite helpful. So just judging if the idea is to get something with a relatively quick turnaround, I'd be a little bit conscious then if you open it up with very specific references to what the need requirements are, you then probably have to be taking various sessions of evidence on that directly, which again might, there's no point. One sense, in theory, we could do a report lasting a year, and we could get a great deal of detail. It would be quite worthwhile in that sense on it, but it would actually mean that the boat would have sailed a long time beforehand, before we do that. So from that point of view, I think there may be some merit in what's there in terms of the current sort of references.
Kayla?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just apologies heading up out there. In terms of the devolution of corporation tax around this, it has illustrated the variability of information relating to local revenue streams, and you did refer to the lack of data. Certainly in terms of the Barnett review, I think we should also consider the extent to which public finance information is available, and to support that or enhance financial accountability around that. Any review of Barnett should take account of any incomes, expenditures and need in terms of public finance information. So I suppose to consider the extent to which local available public finance data can support total financial accountability in the context of Barnett. So I think in terms of data, certainly, I think we need to consider that.
That's something that could be added to in terms of reference, in terms of data and transparency.
Chair, it could be added, or alternatively, you could cover it with, agree to cover it within the concerns, the fourth bullet point there, or you could be specific about it.
Yeah, so you could put something in the fourth bullet point, including public finance data. Any other views, members? Okay. Members content with the wording of the terms of reference as amended? Agreed? Can I advise members the copy of the terms of reference will be sent to the Department and other relevant Assembly committees for information. Can I seek agreement to the following: to commission a research paper providing an up-to-date literature review on the issues relating to the Barnett formula and a list of suggested expert witnesses to provide oral evidence, and in the meantime to contact the 3 expert witnesses, Gerard Holdham, Professor Ian McLean and Professor Alan Trench, who previously provided evidence, to request that they provide an update briefing. Agreed? Agreed. Moving on to committee work programme. Can I advise members that the Minister has previously agreed to commission independent research into the cost and impact of welfare reform, which he referred to during his session with the committee. Can I seek agreement that in view of the committee's scrutiny function to write to the Department seeking a copy of the terms of reference and the indicative time frame for that review? Agreed. Can I advise members the committee will also need to liaise with the Social Development Committee given the joint interest in this issue? Can I refer members then to the draft work programme at pages 170 to 172? Members content with the programme as presented? Agreed. Agreed. Any other business? No. No. Next meeting will be Wednesday, 15th of October at 10 a.m.
Apologies for that will be away.